Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Strengthening Connections Through Real-World Applications in English Composition. My name is Danny Shapiro, and I'm on the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. Our speaker today is Hawks' very own Sarah Quinn. As Hawks Learning's English product specialist, Sarah develops and maintains the English product line. Sarah joined the Hawks family in 2017, and since then, the English team has launched English Composition with Integrated Review, as well as several print products, including Foundations of English Guided Notebook, Foundations of English Grammar Workbook, the Reading and Writing Handbook for college students, and the forthcoming English Composition 2nd edition course. We will have a live Q&A with Sarah after her presentation, so please enter your questions into the Q&A box as we go. This webinar is being recorded, and that recording will be sent to all attendees once the video is processed and ready for distribution. And I will, on that note, go ahead and hand it over to you, Sarah.
Great, thanks, Danny. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Danny mentioned, my name is Sarah Quinn, and I work on the Hawks English content team. And today I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the very exciting new additions and updates that we've made into the 2nd edition of our English composition title, and more specifically, how you can use it as a resource to really help your students strengthen the connections that they're able to make between the composition course content and their daily lives, real world applications. So I will start off with a very brief introduction and overview to our content development process in general, how we kind of approach content development, as well as a very brief introduction to the Hawks platform. If you're new to Hawks, if you've never seen the software, I'll just start with a very brief introduction so you have a little bit of context. And then I'll move into those new addition features and specific opportunities for application for you in the classroom, for your students. And those kind of apply to our English composition title. And we also have an integrated review sort of offering for that title and version, which is also forthcoming in its new 2nd edition. So I'll kind of be mentioning both of those different titles. And we should have a few minutes at the end for questions. So as Danny mentioned, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those and any others that come up at the end. Oops, here we go. So as an English team here at Hawks and in general, the Hawks products, we take a very contributor-centered approach to product development. So we work with instructors just like you all across the country to design, develop, and author the content that goes into our products. We understand that you as the educators are really the ones on the front lines of education. You know the areas where students are tending to struggle, the areas where you as the instructor need better support. So really our goal in the creation and release of these materials is to make sure that we are touching base with the people who are using it and collecting feedback even after the product is launched and in use. We rely very heavily on that instructor feedback so that we can get a better, clear understanding of what's working very well for you in your classrooms, what's not working so well, and what we can do to improve. So we really maintain that very close relationship between us and our users. And I've put the English email here down at the bottom. If you would ever like to contact myself or the English team here at Hawks, you can always reach out to that english@hawkslearning.com email. We love to hear feedback, requests from customers and students. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to touch base with you. This here, I just wanted to, like I said, for any of you who are new to Hawks or have never seen the platform, I just wanted to provide a very quick overview of what the software looks like, kind of the approach to the product that we have in the software. So this is what a student would see when they click on any given lesson. This is what we call our recommended learning path. And as you can see, we've got 3 modes here, starting with Learn, which is essentially just an interactive version of the textbook content. So any given lesson in the textbook will look identical here in Learn, but it is in that interactive platform. So students are kind of able to click around, skip pages, type in answers, click on words and make selections in that way. So they can kind of walk through that instructional lesson content in the interactive way. And once they get familiar with it and are ready to begin practice, Then they hop into the practice mode, which is just as it sounds, it's just kind of a penalty-free practice environment where the questions kind of come with learning aids and tutoring components that we provide them in practice, like hint, solution messages, explain error that specifically tells them what they've gotten wrong and why. So we can kind of help them build their skills at their own pace. They can kind of skip around through questions, look at different versions of questions to see if maybe having a different example sentence would really help them gain that understanding. And once they feel comfortable about mastering that content and the skills that they've built in practice, then they would go into Certify, which is essentially the homework portion or the graded portion. And in Certify, they would see very similar questions that they've seen in practice, no question types that they haven't practiced through or anything like that, but they have no access to the learning aids. We remove all of the tutor and the hint so that they really have to sort of show their understanding and show that mastery of the content at a certain proficiency level. And you can see here we have the mastery sort of default at an 80%. That's customizable. You can make it whatever you choose. But our general mastery-based approach in the software is that students can reach this mastery level, which means they can still get a couple of answers wrong, 1 to 2 answers wrong, and still get a completion grade, 100% credit grade for that homework assignment. If they miss one and drop below one extra and drop below that mastery level percentage, then it would actually place them back into practice and they would see that tailored set of questions actually specifically. They aren't going to be exposed to any of the questions that they've gotten right, only the ones that they've gotten wrong. So this recommended learning path and kind of our general approach to this mastery really seeks to give them a tailored set of learning opportunities so that they can kind of be working at their own pace and reach that 100% in their own way and with the support that they need. So that's a very brief overview. If you are new to Hawks and you'd like to learn more, please reach out. I know that our representatives would be happy to show you a demo and provide you review copies and answer any questions that you may have. Now moving into kind of the heart of this, kind of the meat and potatoes, discussing the really exciting new edition content for this English composition title. So we've added 7 new lessons in this title, and this list of new topics was really driven by the feedback that we've received over the course of the first edition of English composition. We've kept record of every request that a student or instructor has sent to us. I'd like to see more on this topic, X, Y, and Z. We use that feedback to really drive the information and the topics and the lesson content that we added into this new title. So as you can see, kind of starting off, literature content was a hot request for us. And of course you can have it, your own title dedicated to literature, go in depth as you want, but we really sought for these 2 lessons to design them in a way that supports literature as it might be incorporated into the composition classroom specifically. So we hope that we've struck a balance. We've got 2 lessons here, one in the reading chapter from a reading standpoint, how to sort of deconstruct a literary text, and then one from a writing standpoint, how to respond effectively through writing to write a literary analysis essay. We hope that these have sort of struck a balance of being foundational enough so that they're approachable for any student who might not have any sort of background or prior knowledge with literary genres or literary elements. But we hope that they're also comprehensive enough to where they really equip students with the tools that they need to be able to successfully and effectively read and understand and make inferences about a work of literature and then respond through literary analysis writing. Moving into more of research, we added a new first lesson in our research chapter for basics of information literacy. This was another really hot topic and hot request. Essentially, we wanted to sort of kick off this research chapter with the very, very basic fundamentals of what it means for students to be successful researchers and fact finders, really. When you need to know information, first of all, how do you know exactly what you need? How do you know where to look for it? How can you make sure that you're consulting credible sources and avoiding unreliable ones? How to spot fake news, which is huge right now, hugely important for students to be able to spot fake news and stop the spread of it, if at all possible. We hope that this is a really practical lesson that will help students not just be better academic researchers for their research in their courses, but to be better researchers and be better sort of fact finders in any area of their life. And then the remaining new lessons, as you can see, are in chapter 8, which is now titled Writing Beyond the English Classroom. These, as you can tell from the titles, we've got professional and technical writing, multimedia projects, thinking critically about pop culture. This is really kind of the heart of our top focus for this new edition, is to make it applicable not just in the composition classroom, but to make those skills translatable really easily into other areas of reading and writing and critical thinking that students are going to be expected to reach in any area of their life, professionally or personally. So I always hesitate to use the word engagement because I know in our field it's just so trite and so overused, but I really feel strongly that particularly this pop culture lesson that we've got, as well as the other new lessons, are going to be very interesting for students and very relevant and helpful for them to sort of see those connections between what it means to be a good reader and writer in English class, but also how that can translate and help you become a better communicator at work or in your personal life or in school. Thinking critically about pop culture, this lesson kind of breaks down the messages that students are being inundated with daily in movies, TVs, video games, ads that they see on their Instagram feed. How they can kind of stop and pause and think critically about those persuasive techniques that are being very deliberately employed to get their attention, and kind of being more cognizant of those types of topics and those types of real world skills. So one of the new features that sort of allows for this thoughtful reflection through writing is the writing prompts that we've added. We've put 2 to 3 of these thought-provoking writing prompts at the end of every lesson. And these really sort of vary in terms of what they ask students to write, the length, but at the sentence, paragraph, and essay level. And the topics are related to the surrounding lesson content, but they're also very open-ended, in a lot of instances, kind of casual, informal, and approachable. We feel, especially for students who might not be comfortable really with that sort of informal writing, stream of consciousness, how to really write out your thoughts that you're thinking. I think sometimes that sort of informal, open-ended writing can be even harder for students than being given such detailed prompts and checklists for what to do. So we hope that these really give students an opportunity to sort of navigate themselves and navigate their own reflections and their own responses through a writing prompt. This is something that we've heard over the years, instructors saying they really love to assign writing prompts to their students on a daily basis if they can, but it's hard to come up with them at the frequency with which they'd like to assign them. So by putting a couple of them in every single of the 80 or so lessons that we have in composition, we hope that you will be able to really use these as a basis for not just assigning them to your students as they come across them in the textbook or in the software, but also, creating discussion board assignments based on these, or you could utilize our peer review platform, our smart review platform, to have students kind of be reading each other's and responding in that way. We really hope that these give you a good basis to sort of take them in any direction that really best supports your course. Moving into some of the specific additions into our textbook, we've added chapter projects, which I feel really strongly about as a really great opportunity for additional practice, additional work. We have in every chapter project at the end of the chapters, we have a project assignment and a writing assignment. So the project assignments are more collaborative in nature. They really kind of promote that group critical thinking and application. I'm sorry, the screenshots are a little hard to see because it's a big page. But for the example that we have on the screen here from chapter 3, the writing process, it asks students to come up with a visual and a tweet, so like a caption and a tweet for each of the 6 stages of the writing process. So it really asks them to sort of apply their understanding and synthesize their understanding of each of those writing steps in a context that they're familiar with, a tweet, keeping it under 140 characters or whatever the limit is that they need to follow in, tweets and writing on Twitter, and kind of approaching it and framing it in that more creative context. And then the writing assignment is kind of self-explanatory. These are more independent in nature, more reflective in nature, and just ask students to sort of hone in on a skill specifically that they have experienced throughout that chapter and apply it in a piece of writing. And these do kind of go more in depth. You can see we break them out into truncated parts, clear directions. We also have a checklist at the end of every assignment, both project and writing, so that students can make sure that they're crossing off every single step that they would have needed to follow in order to complete those assignments appropriately. Also, another addition in the textbook, we've added chapter exercises at the end of each chapter. So we've pulled 3 to 5 questions per lesson into these chapter exercises. And as you can see from the screenshot, we've varied the question type. So we have some traditional multiple choice, fill in the bubble. We've also got some free response questions and some of these more passage-based or example text-based questions. And we hope that by providing these different question structures and not just multiple choice, boom, 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 we've really hoped that we can prompt students to improve their actual writing by interacting with these different question types. So some of the passage-based questions would present them an example text and say, read the following passage and select the sentences that use semicolons incorrectly. So by getting them to interact with example text in that way, we hope that really it kind of hones in their editing skills, their revision skills. Can you spot errors in a piece of writing? Can you identify what needs to be improved and actually do what needs to happen to make that improvement in your writing or elsewhere? So we hope that they translate well in, peer reviews and their application when they're actually revising and editing their own writing. And we also, for these chapter exercises, there's an answer key in the back of the book that contains odd-only answers, so students can be monitoring their understanding but not have access to every single correct answer, of course. And the instructor edition of the textbook contains these inline red answers that you see here for sort of easier reference for you as the instructor. Also in the textbook, we have added a preface, and the preface content really focuses on study skills, academic skills, like how to read an English textbook, tips for success, taking notes, annotating, do I need an English tutor, kind of those self-assessed skills that students, we really realize can be the difference between a student who struggles in a course and a student who is able to work through it successfully. We hope that by adding the study skills, the sort of softer skills at the beginning of the textbook, it can kind of help level that playing field. So no matter where a student is on their ability and their experience being an active learner and kind of actively applying these study skills, we hope it can kind of level that playing field and hopefully get everybody as close to the same level as possible. Additionally, some more minor components in the textbook, we've added an answer key, like I mentioned, an index and a glossary. So these are all, of course, standard essential components of a textbook that we hope will make it more easier for you to reference, more readable for your students, and kind of more of a well-rounded learning resource. Moving into some more of the additions that we've made in the software platform, we've added chapter reviews, and these are going to be at the end of every chapter. I'll press this play button so that you can see this sort of video walkthrough of what the chapter reviews look like in Learn. We have pulled in from every lesson the sort of core content, so the interactives, the group activities, the lesson roadmap containing all of the major topics, all of the annotated writing applications, the writing prompts I mentioned, the glossary of terms. So this Learn mode for these chapter reviews is really just a big picture overview of those core lesson contents and concepts in every single lesson. After a student would work through this Learn mode in the chapter review, then they would have the opportunity to practice roughly 2 questions per lesson as they move into the practice and certify field. And these chapter reviews, we hope will be a really good tool for both you and for the students. Say you're not necessarily assigning every single lesson in a given chapter, but you'd like for your students to at least breeze through or walk through or be exposed to those core concepts. These chapter reviews are a really good way for you to sort of customize what you want your students to see and what they're able to sort of walk through. Even if you aren't able to cover everything in the chapter and assign everything, you can at least give them the opportunity to sort of breeze through the major content in each lesson. Moving into some more of the specific pedagogical approaches to this new edition content and how we really focused on boosting those real world connections. One of the biggest focuses that we honed in on was images, and not just adding a ton of images, which we did, but also really making the captions more meaningful, kind of going beyond just decorative images that look nice when you open a textbook, but making the captions more thought-provoking, more meaningful, and really helping students to sort of initially make that connection so that they can deepen it themselves by reflection. So the first example on the left here with the computer, this is in our rhetorical essay structures lesson, which covers process analysis as one of the rhetorical structures. And this aside kind of makes a connection between process analysis and YouTube tutorials, which is likely something that every student has probably watched once. Probably most of you have watched a YouTube tutorial if you need to find out how to perform a step-by-step task. And we hope that, kind of just the nature of this example, we hope that by connecting YouTube with this process analysis, that really helps students deepen their understanding of the lesson concepts. When they're able to kind of see how it connects in what they do naturally on a daily basis, hopefully that would give them a better understanding of what process analysis means and how it should look through writing or in a process analysis essay. And similarly, the second example, this deals with connotative meaning and denotative meaning. I believe this is in our analyzing rhetoric through word choice lesson. Connotative and denotative meaning is something that probably most students, even though they don't know explicitly that it's connotative and denotative, they're very familiar with what words you can use in one context or what words mean when someone says something versus a different person saying something. So it really kind of draws attention to that. And this specific example asks them to consider words that they've probably heard, maybe been used to describe them. I know they've been used to describe me: bossy, sassy, feisty, or shrill, and how those, while they're not explicitly gendered words, they're usually used to describe women rather than men. Contextually, that's what you hear. And actually asking them to stop and think of their own, like, what do you think about this? Can words shape society, and vice versa? In what ways? So asking them to kind of pause, reflect, and make their own connections. Another way that we sort of have tried to boost these types of connections and boost the understanding of the instructional content is through examples. We take across the board, really, in all of our English products, we take a very example heavy approach to instructional content because we really feel strongly about providing students with a really solid framework of a skill or of a task before they're ever asked to replicate it or demonstrate it themselves in a homework assignment or a graded assignment. So we've used contextualized examples, but we really wanted to focus on these and expand them and really enrich them, make them more helpful, and make them more specific. So not just giving students a strong and weak example of something, but explaining why. Why is the weak thesis weak? What makes the strong thesis strong? And how can you sort of replicate those skills in your own writing? We want to sort of guide students as much as we can in that way so that they have that solid framework and can move forward in confidence. Some more additional application opportunities. All of the features that you see here are components that were present in our first edition. But again, like the images, like the contextualized examples, we wanted to hone in on these as areas where we could strengthen and grow and improve those opportunities for students to be able to, like I keep saying, stop and really reflect and make those connections. So we've got tons of group activities, which are informal opportunities for students to stop and get in a small group. Maybe that's on Zoom because of COVID and things being remote, entering in a small Zoom room, chatting about something, discussing in this example how the image could be described based on audience, which is what they would be learning about in the lesson contents. The further resources are a really great way for us to be able to provide and sort of link them with external resources that we know are credible and verifiable. This one is about how COVID has obviously so changed and shaped the way that we digitally communicate. So we provide them an article about Zoom etiquette. I know that was something that everybody kind of globally struggled with to adapt last year when everything went online for Zoom. I'm sure we're probably all a little bit more familiar with what it's like to video chat and Zoom and that etiquette, but providing these sorts of relevant and helpful connections, we hope will really engage students. There's that word again. Writing environments, again, are a common theme and have been in both editions, but we tried to sort of beef them up and make them more specific. We have 3 specific environments: everyday, professional, and academic. And these are really just drawing those connections explicitly to those writing scenarios that students may find themselves in. This one is specifically about explaining directions and providing a level of detail and how you can sort of benefit not just in a descriptive writing essay, but in your daily life and your daily conversations. I also wanted to mention the annotated writing applications. Again, this is something that has been present in the text, but we tried to make sure that we were improving the relevancy and improving the strength of these annotated writing applications that we have at the end of every lesson in English composition. We really contextualize the lesson concepts in a sample writing. So these vary in terms of length and genre and voice. And tone. It all depends on the lesson contents and what is being covered in the lesson, but they will always sort of encapsulate those ideas so that students can see what they look like in a cohesive piece of writing. This example is one of our new writing applications in our new Analyzing and Interpreting Literature lesson. This provides a chapter from Zit Kala Shah's American Indian Stories anthology. And as you can see, it asks students to consider the literary elements that were covered in the lesson and how they can kind of spot those in the essay: figurative language, plot, characters, point of view. And you can see that we've got the underlining and the annotations to really sort of guide students to understand and kind of draw their attention to those key concepts in a way where we can really sort of make sure that they're seeing the whole picture and seeing how those parts work together as a whole. Kind of mentioning back to the software, we have made 70 new questions in the software, so 10 for each of the 7 new lessons. And again, as I've mentioned before, and as you've seen in the chapter exercises, we have several different question types and structures so that students are really given the opportunity to interact with different structures and versions: multiple choice, passage-based, select the best answer, select all that apply, different number of correct answer choices, so that we can really kind of get them practicing these skills in different environments. And it's not just repetitive and then sort of learning or memorizing patterns in the questions, but really kind of experiencing that new content and being able to master it. So these 2 examples, the first one is kind of passage-based, which sentences indicate the setting of the story, select all that apply. And then this also in our literature lesson provides excerpts from poetries and short stories and asks them to interact with it in some way, shape, or form. And all of those questions have the tutoring components that we really try to mirror instructor support in that way. So if a student were taking this practice assessment in the same room with you and they had a question for you, what does this definition mean? Can you help me answer this? We try to provide that sort of support in the question tutoring components so that a student is able to sort of get it all from there and sort of not have to ask you those types of questions about these questions. In addition to the new questions we've added, we've also made a lot of updates to the existing questions in the question bank. We've strengthened a lot of them, updated them for this new edition content, and we will also continue to do that on a rolling basis. Even after this product is out and in use after the fall, we will continue to update the questions and strengthen the questions on a rolling basis while this product is in use. And I just want to mention the integrated review sort of offering and version of this title. So it contains all of the composition content that I've just discussed, including the 7 new lessons. It kind of is structured to include this embedded review at the beginning of each credit level chapter. So as you can see here, this is the chapter 4, just as an example of English composition. It deals with essay level introductory paragraphs, conclusions, body paragraphs, thesis statements. And as we were creating this co-requisite structure of this new title a few years ago, we really wanted to think through, and we wanted our contributing authors to think through, what would a student absolutely need to know in order to successfully and confidently tackle this credit level content? Say those students did not necessarily place, via AccuPlacer or a different sort of scoring assessment into this credit level course, but they need that extra support. What would those students need to know in order to master this content? So as you can see here, the integrated review really goes down to this sort of fundamental concepts that those skills are built upon, sorting general and specific information into categories, and then writing at the paragraph level. Before you can hope to write a strong thesis or an essay, you need to know how to write a topic sentence at the paragraph level, how to organize and draft a paragraph. So this is just to sort of showcase the structure and explain the structure of this new title, which, like I mentioned, is also going to be in the second edition. It contains all of those 7 new lessons, all of the writing prompts as well, including writing prompts in these integrated review lessons. And with this review title, we call it Comp R for ease of reference. We've come out with a guided notebook too, because we know that a lot of students these days, I know actually I benefit also from multimodal learning, having that pen and paper supplement to be able to sort of follow along and tangibly be writing in. I think that has been helpful for students, especially in such a remote world when everything is done on the computer. We wanted to offer a printed supplement that could kind of help students who really appreciate that more kinesthetic, tangible work. So they would follow along with the instructional content in the learn mode of the software while they could write down in the guided notebook their actual answers to this, filling in the bubbles, underlining. We've also included the writing prompts in the guided notebook as well, so that they can kind of have it all in one space to be able to respond accordingly. And sort of all of this to say, our main goal with these products and in working with our contributing authors to create these, again, just expanding the number of connections that students are able to make and really the relevancy that they see in their English courses, and how that can kind of translate outside of English, and how it can make them better employees, better in their career field, better communicators in their personal lives. That is actually all that I have prepared. Hopefully we have some more time for questions. Danny, it looks like we might have gotten some questions in the Q&A here.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah, for that. Audience, as a reminder, you can go ahead and submit questions for Sarah in the Q&A, and now's a great chance to get to those. We had one come in from Greg Horn, who's asking about when he can begin to start to use this new edition. And I know that our goal as a team is to have everything 100% ready for instructors and students to adopt starting in the fall term. But potentially we may be able, if you're interested in starting a little bit earlier, may be able to get you transitioned. So I'm going to have your training and support representative reach out to you, and we can see what we can do as far as getting you started a little bit earlier, if that's going to work best for your course.
Yep, exactly.
Sarah, I know that as I'm watching the presentation, for instructors who are maybe not as familiar with our software, who are a little bit new to what we do, was hoping to have you talk about just a couple things that you touched on. For the writing prompts, are those available both in the software and in the textbook? Yes,
that's a great question. They are in both products. They appear at the end of every lesson in the textbook, as well as in the software, and the guided notebook that I just mentioned for that integrated review. There are also writing prompts in the guided notebook of every lesson, as well as the software. So they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Great, thank you. And when you say 70 new questions, Can you explain a little bit more about iterations and how that works? Because when you say 70, it's not just 70, it's actually a lot more.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have at least 25 different versions or iterations of each question, so that when students are in practice, they do actually have the opportunity to sort of flip through those different versions of the questions. Like I mentioned earlier, if they feel that, seeing a different example sentence would really help them get it a little bit more, they can cycle through those and see a unique version of those questions without actually moving to the next question. So it's a lot of question content, and all of the tutoring components are specific to that iteration. So it really does provide students a ton of opportunities to sort of build up their skills and flip through different versions of the question to make sure they're really understanding it and not just memorizing patterns, in the answer choices or things like that.
Great, thank you. And have another customer currently using the first edition, Nikki, who's very excited about the basics of information literacy. Nikki, we will also have your training and support representative reach out to you about how to get that included in your course as soon as possible, and get you using this new edition as soon as possible. So we're glad to hear that you all are excited about what's coming and what's being offered as a part of this.
Yeah, definitely. And Nikki, whenever you do get a chance to review that content of basics of information literacy, please let us know if you feel comfortable, sharing your thoughts on it, your suggestions, your recommendations. We'd just love to hear from you.
All right. Well, unless we see any more questions come in, I think that wraps up our time for today. We have one more. What do I have to do to review the text? We will absolutely reach out to you, and we are happy to ship a copy of the text directly to your door. You can also ship it to your campus if you'd like, but we know many instructors are at home, so we're happy to ship it to you, make it as easy as possible, and we'd love to have you flip through it, review it, and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Well, if you do have more questions, you can reach our team at marketing@hawkslearning.com. And again, you can also reach Sarah at that english@hawkslearning.com email address that she shared earlier. And thank you to everyone for attending. We really appreciate it, and we'll send you a link to this recording when it's available. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today.